Hi and welcome. This is Laura from Grain & Co. Today I'm going to go through with you our new DIY kits with our 3D signs. I'll do an example for you today and I'll show you some of the variations and some little things and tips and tricks that will make it easier for you to do your kit at home. So what you'll get in your kit is your unfinished project. This has a back and a front, so these are two separate pieces. You will have some makeup sponges or foamy little wedges there. You'll have your paint colors. You'll have some sandpaper, depending if you're staining or not. You'll have a foam brush. And the only thing that you really won't have in your kit is you'll need some tape, painter's tape, and you'll need some crazy glue to be able to glue this together. So let's get started. So as you get started here, I'm just going to show you that this has two separate pieces. Now when we cut these out, we do put a masking tape over our wood so it keeps it from burning through our laser. We are very good at trying to remove that before we put it into your kit, but there might be the chance that we have forgotten. So if it doesn't look like a wood grain on there and it looks like something like that where you see all these scorchy burn marks, that needs to come off. So there is a little thin layer of a masking tape and I'm just peeling that off. It's on the front as well as the back. So if you were to glue this on and your design might not stay on your wood. So just make sure that we have removed that from your design before you get started painting. And we'll do our best to make sure it's not on your design. Okay, so we're gonna get started first with the background. So depending on your kit, your background may vary. It may be just plain. It may have some score marks. So these have some score lines in it. So we need to make sure we kind of keep those seen as we paint. So we do have some tricks for you as we do that. So, another thing your kit won't have is toothpicks. So toothpicks will be really good for that. So we're gonna start with our base color. So we're using orange for our pumpkin. If you've been a part of our workshops before, most of our base painting is done with a brush. With a laser cutout shape, you don't want to paint the edges. You want to keep that burnt edge. If you do want to paint it, that's totally up to you. But depending on what you're doing, if you paint the edge, it might make it a little bit more difficult for your piece to go into its template here in order to glue it in the right spot. So depending on your kit, you may have, say for example, something like this. Now this has several different pieces and we're only painting the back, the frame, and this piece. Now this is a very simple kit and this word can really go anywhere, but there's some other kits that are very specific to where you put your lettering. So that's why we've included the outer portion of your design. So if you were to put this in first, once you've glued that on, okay, and then you stick your letters in there with glue on the back and set them, that's exactly where they're gonna be. So just, that's why you'll have that extra piece. So anyways, I'll go over a little bit more of that once we get going here. All right, so we're gonna do some painting. So when you're painting your background, trying to avoid getting paint on your edges, we've got a makeup sponge and I've put some paint down. Now, if I was going to paint this, I'm not gonna start right at the edge because you're definitely gonna leak some on the edge there. So I'm got a little bit of paint on there and I'm gonna start in the middle. And I'm gonna kind of wipe it on, and as I hit that edge, I'm kind of lifting up so I don't paint the edge, and that's what we're doing there. So don't worry about that first coat being perfect. Flip your design around your piece around if you have to, and just wipe it on very lightly. But remember, lift up as you go. And yes, I've taught you to paint in the direction of the grain, so the best thing is to do is to try and still wipe it on in that way. And that way it'll look more natural. So just start in the middle, so that way you have most of your paint in the middle and not at your edges. And now you'll do this no matter what project you're doing. If you're doing a painted background, this is kind of how you will do it regardless of the size. Now with those grooves that have been scored into your design as I'm painting, they are filling in a little bit. So as you can see they're not very clean. So that's what the toothpick is for. While your paint is still wet, just gently take your toothpick and clean out any paint in there. So now you've got that better definition on your background there. So, well, that's drying because we wiped it on. It's not going to take very long to dry. So we'll work on the first coat on your words, and then we'll come back really quickly and do that. So painting words like this makes it really difficult. Trying to hold it, trying not to get paint on the edges and on your fingers is really quite hard. So that's where the painter's tape will come into play. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of tape, and I would prefer something a little bit wider, except I don't have it at this moment. So you will take your tape and you will make it into a loop, put the overlap sides down, and oops, parchment paper isn't going to work for that. So you're going to need like a plain table or a piece of paper somewhere. It's going to stick really well. And I'm going to do 2, so that way I've got a bit more space for it to stick onto. So I'm just going to put them side by side. Now with that, you will take your design and you will stick it on there. So now it's not going to move as we paint our little detail there. So give me a second, I got to grab some paper towel. Okay, so less is best when it comes to painting something like this. So I'm going to have some paper towel here. You can have a paper plate, styrofoam plate, anything like that. But I've taken my full makeup wedge and I've actually cut it down into a half size. If I had a bigger area to dab the paint on, then I would use a bigger one. But because my words are very, very tiny, I don't want a huge foam brush to do this. So put a little bit of paint, and then I blotted most of it off, and then I'm just going to dab on very, very little. Now you'll have to do this a few times so that way you can get the coverage that you want. And I kind of pinch my foam piece so that I have more of a point. Just keep blotting. Dip, and then I blot off. So there hardly should be anything on there. Your foam wedge should be almost dry as you do this. And as you can see, with it being on the tape, your design is staying there. You don't have to worry about it jumping all over the place. You don't have to hold it, and it can just sit there. So now I'm going to try and lift it up and show you as best I can. Just lift up the edges, and you can see that there's no paint on the sides here. Can see no paint, so nice and clean. I mean, if you had to, you can always take your sandpaper and kind of do a light sanding, or you can even take a black or brown permanent marker after, and you can always come and or a brown or black paint pen depending on the color of the burn on the sides, and you can kind of just go over those edges to clean it up. So we're just gonna let that sit and dry, and then we're gonna come back to our pumpkin. So our pumpkin is nice and dry. So in your kit is a 400 grit sandpaper, and you'll just give this a light sanding with the grain. Doesn't take much. If you did get a little paint on the side, you can always just come and do a light sand to get any off of there, and then you can go ahead and do your second coat. So we're just gonna dip. In between coats, if you don't have time to come back right away, then just wrap up with your stuff. Your makeup sponges with paint on them dry out fairly quickly, so once it's dry, you can always just snip just above where it dried out, and then you can continue using it again. So you don't have to throw it away until you're done your project. So anyways, I'm just wiping on my second coat, and I'm getting the coverage that I want. So this is all I'm gonna need for this particular one. Just like that. Watch your fingers as you, in case you get some paint in there, and then you grab the edges of your sign, which looks fine there. Let's come back. All right, and once again, take your toothpick and clean out anything in your score marks. If your paint tends to kind of raise as you run it through, don't worry, once it dries, you're just gonna sand that down, and then it'll be nice and flat. So second coat wiped on with a makeup sponge. See, nice good coverage, nice and thin. That's gonna dry really quickly. So we're just gonna leave that. Now my lettering, because I did such thin coats, is already dry. So we're gonna come back in here again. So I'm gonna dab off, and I'm gonna show you this time that there is absolutely nothing on my makeup sponge. Like, you can't even tell that there's paint on there, and it's really hard because it's white, so you really can't see it at all. But then you're just gonna come by here again. You don't have to worry about sanding on the little letters here for now. You'll do a nice little sanding after. Smooth any texture out, but that'll be fine. Just watch your edges too when you dip, that when you're taking off that extra paint, that you're also getting all of it off on the edges too, because when you blot, then you don't have to worry about that paint running down the side of your design. Okay, so we're gonna just leave that for now. I have one that is pretty much, it is finished. So I'm just gonna go over that because this will be the exact same thing we're gonna do with the one that we're painting. So this one has an edge. So for some of the kits that we've just recently released, like the herringbone one with the welcome or the home, it will come like this. So here's the frame that you would stain. Here is that outer template, I was supposed to call it, that you'll use to center your words if you don't want to just free form it. And then here's that. So just put that one back together. So yeah, so you would stain. This one happens to be painted, but you will glue this on, and then you're going to put your inside template in there, and then you're going to take your glue on the back of your design and set it into place like that. So I gotta find my glue. Just give me a second. 2 seconds. I gotta go find the glue. All right, glue, here we go. So Now you don't want to use wood glue because first of all, it can slide really well. So when you're setting these things, you need to do something that's going to set extremely fast. So we're using, this is Gorilla Super Glue. It dries in like 10 seconds. So a little goes a very long way. So these are very tiny words. So you do not have a whole lot of area to put your glue. So I'm going to start with the outside, just like on the other one there, and I'm not even barely squeezing it. I'm just putting little teeny tiny dots every so often. You want to be careful of the really skinny areas. What's nice about super glue or crazy glue, whatever you want to call it, is it dries clear, where wood glue can leave a yellow little, when it dries and seeps underneath, it can be kind of a yellowish tone. So anyway, so we're going to take the frame and I'm going to set it over top, lining it up. So this particular glue gives me about 10 seconds and I want to push it into place. And I'm just going to give a little bit of a press. I'll let that dry really quick. Now, when we go to put this in, we could just set it right inside the frame. What happens is it makes it sometimes a little difficult to get out, and if you happen to put too much glue on your lettering that you need to put in there, what it can do is it seeps underneath and then it can stick this part into place. So what you'll want to do is grab some dimes or something very, very thin and set it underneath your template. So that way it's up just a little bit. So that way if you happen to put a little bit too much glue on your lettering and such, that it won't keep that thing in place. So this seems to be holding very well. So I'm going to grab my dimes and I'm just going to place them down first and see if they're in my way. So right now when I do this, yeah, they're a little bit in my way, so I'm just going to pull this out and push them as far away as I can. Okay, so it's sitting within the frame of the outside of the pumpkin, which now I just turn my dimes to the bottom. Anyway, so it's got a little bit of a lip, so it'll be easy for me to get out, but it'll allow me to still put these letters in there without getting that other piece stuck. So depending on the details that you're going to put in there, there is one sign here, the new herringbone one with the home with the wreath. The wreath only fits in there one specific way. So what I would suggest is making sure that you know exactly which direction that wreath is going to sit in. Pre-fit it first, take it out, put a little bit of glue, and then that way you just turn it back the same way you took it out and you should be good there. Okay, so a little bit of glue. So once again, my crazy glue, and just a tiny bit goes a very long way. Just try and put it in those spots that a little bit more room. Every little bit doesn't usually need it, but crazy glue bottles have some really fine tips, so it makes that a little bit easier. All right, so I've got my glue on the back, and now I'm going to use the template to set it in. And right now I'm just going to use the back of my toothpick, but if you had like, a coffee stir stick or something, you can just give a push down on those letters, and then once they're in there, pull this out. Just gonna take my dimes. So depending on your design, and they need to be in a specific place, this is now exactly where I had designed it to be, right in the middle. So it is perfectly centered. Because it's a scripted word, you could easily just put it wherever, but some of our signs and so forth will be a little bit more detailed, like this one here. So if you tried to put these in by themselves, you may not get that look because you can't get them lined up. So you would have the outside template. You once again glue in those little pieces one by one and then pull up the outside, and then they will be exactly where they're supposed to be. So that's what our new kits are about. We think they're a lot of fun. They're pretty quick once you get going. Yeah, if you have any questions as you're doing your kit, please feel free to message us, call us. We are still, we would type this out, but there's a lot of stuff that's just a lot easier to show. So, if you need some sort of explanation, something specific to your project, please reach out. We want you to have great success with your kit, and we hope you enjoy it, and we'd love to see any pictures of your completed project. So thanks, and good luck.